Just minutes ago, the president saying the U.S. military, quote, totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Kharg Island. The president just speaking. What did he say?
Well, before we get to what he said, I do want to go to this breaking news because moments after he spoke, he talked about Kharg Island. And this is really a big deal. I mean, 90% of Iran's oil exports go through Kharg Island. There had been questions as to why the United States or Israel had not bombed Kharg Island, particularly given its economic strength for Iran. It is a place, it is kind of a sensitive area, and it's clearly something that the U.S. could have targeted. President Trump had been asked questions about this. He kind of evaded the answer earlier today. Now, here's what he said. Because there is so much oil infrastructure in this area, he specifically says, I have chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. There is a reason why this is so important. Earlier today, I was talking to White House officials. They said there was going to be actions as early as this weekend, as early as this evening, that were going to show how the U.S. was working towards trying to get these ships through the Strait of Hormuz, getting the Strait of Hormuz opened again. That is clearly what they were referring to, was these explosions in Kharg Island, a place that had seemed like it was going to be off limits. Clearly here he is saying open up the Strait of Hormuz or else you're going to see more bombs dropping and more strikes in the area. Now, we did also hear from President Trump just seconds before he sent that Truth Social post saying that those Navy escorts were going to start happening soon. I was told by White House officials they were going to have to clear that area. They have to make sure it was safe for the military, that they were going to have to get the resources there. But he did say the word soon. And one of the more interesting things we heard him say is that he has officially taken any sort of timeline off the table. He was asked specifically about his 4 to 5 weeks comments, and he said that he couldn't give a timeline anymore. So I know that we had been reporting that the administration had been saying this, but this is, Donald Trump here officially saying that 4 to 5 week timeline is off the table and instead replacing it with a big question mark.
Talk to us about the significance of this moment and that threat, too, that Kristen told us about, of the president basically saying, hey, I left a little bit in terms of oil infrastructure, but if you don't do what I say, we'll come back.
So, Erica, Kharg Island, you see it on the map there. It's about 25 miles off the coast of Iran, very northern part of the Gulf. It is the valve for Iran's oil economy. And, of course, they're almost wholly dependent on their oil economy for their own government revenues. The Gulf is very shallow, and Kharg Island, that small island there, it's about 8 by 9 square miles. It has the deep water ports where tankers can pull in, get filled up, and then go through the Strait of Hormuz and onward to where they might delivering their oil. Of course, Iranian oil is illicit oil. It's under U.S. sanctions. But that is basically, without those terminals and without that island being operational, Iran cannot export its oil. And that's why it's so significant. I take this as the U.S. saying, okay, you guys are trying to use this pressure point, which the new Supreme Leader declared it yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz. We have pressure points, too, on you. So, knock this off. That's what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. But I also see, Erica, with the deployment of a U.S. Marine Force, the possibility of more military operations on that island. I think that's highly risky. The Iranians can respond to that. But clearly, bottom line, this conflict is not coming to an end anytime soon. It was
Certainly
a 4 to 6 weeks was said at the beginning. That's basically the CENTCOM plan. I think it might go on a little bit longer than that.
And the president, as Kristen was just reporting, taking that off the table. When we look at this moment and the Kharg Island piece of it now that is being brought in, I mean, Brett walked us through the significance of this. Yeah. But the fact that, as he pointed out, we have potentially this unit of up to 2,500 Marines and sailors going in. They are also well versed in combat operations.
Yes.
With all of this playing out tonight, is that how you would envision perhaps these forces being used, is perhaps needing to go to Kharg Island?
Perhaps, but I'd be reluctant to put boots on the ground in this area for a number of reasons. The Iranians can come down and they can block the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a particularly unpleasant place to operate in any time of the year, particularly at night. Having been there during the Iranian hostage crisis on a nuclear aircraft carrier, it's a problem. And boots on the ground. I've been through this number of wars, served with a bunch of people who spent a fair amount of time in Hanoi as visitors under very unpleasant circumstances, and were great heroes. But if we start putting boots on the ground, how do we ensure that they're protected? How do we ensure that they get out if we have to? So that's the initial problem, I see.
It raises a lot of red flags for you.
Oh, absolutely.
And when we look at where things stand, Nazila, this moment, can you put in perspective to us, Brett laid out how significant it is from a military perspective, but Nazila, lay out for us what this actually means to Iran.
Well, yeah.
I think this is entering the war to a different level. This is going to be a new chapter in this war. Kharg Island is the main point where Iran is exporting its oil. And if they can't export oil, or if they lose control over the island, it's going to hurt the Revolutionary Guards Corps in a major way. And I think considering what happened today inside the country and the statements that we were hearing from Iranian officials, they are trying to deflect attention from such realities. Today, Tehran came under quite intense bombing. There was a bombing right in the middle of the demonstrations where some of the leaders showed up. And all we heard from them was that Iranian leaders are there among their own people while the bombs were dropping. The country's infrastructure is getting destroyed. Ordinary Iranians are the ones who are paying the big price for this. But the reality is that the country's oil flow is under question depending on how much Kharg Island has been damaged. And then the big question about the power vacuum. The statement that came out yesterday has raised more questions than given answers. There are questions about the new Supreme Leader's whereabouts, his condition. And why didn't he deliver the speech himself? And why didn't he have someone he could trust who could deliver it? So these are really big questions, and I'm afraid we are entering a totally different chapter now.
In terms of this totally different chapter, Brett, as you were just saying, this signifies to you far beyond 4 to 6 weeks, right? And the president saying, basically taking the timeline off the table. How important is this weekend, I would even say, these next couple of days? What is that going to tell us in terms of the trajectory here?
I think I've been saying since the beginning that the military plan is about 4 to 6 weeks. I think that was a decent assumption. There was some thought earlier this week that given the economic pressure, perhaps President Trump would just declare victory and cut it short. I now think the way this is developing, that's actually not going to happen. And look, Iran decided to play this card of the Strait of Hormuz, and the Supreme Leader said we will use it as a pressure valve, and that is going back all the way to the Carter Doctrine, Erica. We have a doctrine that outside powers or other powers, including Iran, cannot seize this territory, and if they do, it's a vital interest of the United States, and it'll be repelled by military force. So it's a very serious issue. I am not surprised now that the United States is now moving to perhaps organize a naval coalition with coalition partners. I have to say that is extremely difficult work. I did this in the Red Sea. We developed a coalition of almost 20 countries. The UK, Denmark were very effective there to try to open a passage called the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which was under fire from Iranian weapons fired by a group in Yemen called the Houthis. But it's still hard work. Even with that coalition, shippers did not have the confidence to make that passage, just given the threats. So this is hard, difficult, tedious work. It'll take weeks. But I mean, I do think it's important to try to get control of this so that Iran cannot hold this pressure valve, as the new Supreme Leader declared it, assuming it was him yesterday. It's very important. So bottom line, this is not ending anytime soon. I just go back to my first point.